Greetings, true believers. It's time for Spoiler Country's Make Mine Marvel TV, live from the Smith Tower high over Seattle, with your hosts, John, Kenric, Sumner, and Casey. Welcome to Make Mine Marvel TV.
All right, guys, welcome back to Spoiler Country. This is Make My Marvel TV. Today on the show, of course, we have the ever-presence of Andrew Sumner and Casey T. Allen. So today we don't have Johnny because, well, he just wasn't able to make it today. We'll just leave it at that. And we're going to talk about some things. We're far behind. If anybody was following this little show from last year, I think we had our last stuff over. What was it? We talked about Loki.
Yeah, that was the last thing we talked about. Loki.
That was the last thing we talked about.
Did we finish off talking about Loki?
Yeah.
Or did we get to the end of it? Oh,
we did get to the end. So, you know, the funny thing with Loki is I went back and watched it again, and I liked it more the second time than I did the first time. The first time, like the first couple episodes, I kept falling asleep.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't think I've really moved from my assessment, which is that it's brilliantly acted. And Tom Hiddleston's amazing, and he owns that performance as Loki. But I essentially thought the entire thing could have been distilled into one of those 10-minute shorts they used to put out with the early Marvel movie Blu-rays. So yeah. I think if they could have, essentially, the whole story is like basically an incarnation of Loki escapes. He, escapes into the time stream, and he discovers the presence of Kang. And that's really what that whole miniseries is designed to do. It's designed to get you in front of Kang and say, right, Kang is coming. That's what it does. It doesn't really do anything else at all. As diverting as it is, and as many great characters as there are, it's like, what has Loki actually achieved during that period of time? Nothing is the answer. It's really just all. It's entertaining, but it doesn't really. I found it way less satisfying than I found WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I loved WandaVision.
We'll talk about in a bit.
And I think I liked Falcon Winter Soldier the most.
Me too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because there are people out there who of say the four that we're talking about. So include Hawkeye, talk about a bit. I do know some people I respect who like Falcon and Winter Soldier the least. It's easily my favorite by a long way.
Yeah. I just like the storytelling better. The
thing about the Loki show was that it delved
Loki
into.
Show, that was it. You reminded me, mate. Yeah, the Loki show.
It delved into almost like bad Doctor Who territory.
Yeah,
not like fun Doctor Who timey-wimey woo woo woo, but like, oh my God, when's the storyline going to end?
Please let this finish.
Exactly. Yeah. And great acting. Tom Hiddleston killed it. I can't think of the actress that played his, other. She was great. She was very, very good at her job. And I liked how they introduced the big bad at the end. They're just all in the middle could have been, excised.
And it's good to watch Owen Wilson being Owen Wilson, right? Even with a short hair wig and a mustache. But it's good to watch him doing his stuff. Like it's good to watch, say, Jeff Goldblum doing his stuff, right? I mean, he'll never give a performance they do the same stuff all the time, but they're very good at what they do, being this, movie screen version of themselves. And so they're always interesting. But Loki's one of those things where you go, hang on, wait a minute. And you think back and you go, what exactly has just happened in this story? And then you're like, holy, nothing's happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's 10 minutes of narrative in those 6 episodes.
The thing I hate about time travel stories, and Doctor Who actually gets away from this, is everything seems to be foretold, right? They're doing this because they've already done it. Or, they're and everything's already set, and we've already been here a million times. And it starts to get, I'm a very big proponent of free will. It's like when people make the argument that, because I'm not a religious man by any stretch, but I was raised Catholic. And so I know the Bible well enough. I'm not going to quote, I don't quote verses from it because I don't know it like that. But I understand the concept of free will and that God gave us free will coming from the Catholic perspective. And so when people say, well, why did God let wars happen? Why all this stuff happen? Because he gave us free will. That's what makes you have the ability to make the choices you make and do the things that happen without interference. And so when people start talking, it's your destiny for this, I tune out. You know what I mean? And stories that start to do that, I start to tune out quite a bit, because it's like, now you've just taken any chance of something different to happen out the window. And I just, it starts to bore me, because then it's like, well, what's the point of watching this if everything's already predetermined? And time travel stories tend to do that. And so that, and it fell into that same trope.
Yeah, I think this would be a good point for us. I think we're all aligned about, certainly in terms of our opinions about the Loki show and what we thought about it. There are, however, a lot of people who love it, as is always the case.
Tons.
In the same way, but I think we should use this as a segue to pause on the TV show thing, come back to Hawkeye in sequence, but get into
Shang-Chi.
Casey, I can see you're going to say something, mate.
He's got his finger
out. I was gonna, but I agree. We should go into Shang-Chi, because Shang-Chi, oh my gosh, you guys. I loved it. I thought it was great. What did y'all think?
Get my pen up.
I also loved it. And interestingly, I was a big fan of the comics. And the comics are now, the original comics, which I loved, are now a cultural artifact. It's great, it's great.
I never read the
writer, great artist. But of course, if you go back to the original comics, what the kind of MacGuffin is, it's basically Marvel taking what was then like a hyper ascendant entertainment form, which is martial arts movies. Hong Kong martial arts movies becoming very popular in the West, right? And there's a massive martial arts boom. It's the rise of Bruce Lee, right? And Bruce Lee becoming an even bigger star after he dies. And it's all that period of time, and it's Marvel co-opting that. And in that period of time, they create Shang-Chi and they create Iron Fist. And it's about them surfing that martial arts wave. And the way Marvel does it is they create a martial arts hero who's the ultimate martial artist, Shang-Chi, who's born into this legacy where his father's a villain. But in the comic books, the villain that the father is Fu Manchu, who's the archetypal, supremely racist Chinese warlord figure. Yeah, and of course, back then, what they did was they licensed Fu Manchu from the Saxe-Roma estate. And a quick plug, by the way, if you ever want to check out the Fu Manchu books, they're all available from Titan Books. So just check them out. Yeah, we've so as you may be aware, one of our CEOs is a Singaporean. And Vivian Chung, one of our joint CEOs, was a big fan of like presenting that kind of material, even with its culturally questionable aspects. She hates censoring anything, so she's actually published them all. And they're fascinating to read, but they're very much of the time. As a sidebar, there's a series of movie adaptations of Fu Manchu, the ultimate like kind of wily Oriental is a word that no longer in popular use either, kind of warlord figure, nearly always, like as with characters like Charlie Chan or Mr. Moto, played by Anglo actors, by Caucasian actors in like heavy makeup. So
hello, John
really
Wayne,
famous
Genghis Khan.
Yeah. I mean, it's that kind of crazy. It was a thing for decades. So
we've definitely grown from that.
The original Fu Manchu movie, which it's well worth watching, stars Boris Karloff as Fu Manchu. And then they made a series of British-produced Fu Manchu films in the 60s where Christopher Lee plays Fu Manchu. There are 4 of them. The first one, The Face of Fu Manchu, is very good. But again, it's almost unwatchable in the present day. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Anyway, the whole point is Marvel had made Fu Manchu the bad guy. And the idea is that Shang-Chi is Fu Manchu's son. And is at the beginning is a weapon of death for his father, and then Fu Manchu's nemesis, Sir Dennis Nayland Smith, who's like the Sherlock Holmes of the Fu Manchu books. he like aligns himself with Shang-Chi and like helps him out. And quite clearly, the conundrum they were left with for the movie was, okay, we've got to take this character and we've got to rid ourselves, of all the kind of classic 1970s race stereotyping. And they, of course, the way they did that was like as far as I'm aware, they put it together with like an Asian American filmmaking team. And I think that's the brilliance of this reinvention of Shang-Chi. The reason it works and it's so resonant is it's so celebrative and embracing of Chinese mythology, but by people who are of like Chinese origin. And I think that's why when you watch it, you get a kind of an authentic experience.
Yeah.
So they've taken something that was very much a stereotype, and they've delivered a massive amount of credibility to it, like they did with Black Panther 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, and so my daughter-in-law is Anglo-Chinese, and I know that when her and my son went along to see it, she absolutely loved it, because I think what they do in Shang-Chi that's really good is they just bring in all these elements of Chinese mythology which aren't in the original comics.
Yeah.
The mythology in the comics is Fu Manchu mythology, which is
right.
Fu Manchu
all
mythology,
bullshit.
Which is like basically British white guys, talking about, Chinese, Chinese assassins. It's just completely wholly inauthentic.
Ancient Chinese secrets kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah. Whereas Shang-Chi, to me, the movie feels very culturally authentic. Yeah. And I think the guys they put together to make it was great.
Simu Liu, the main actor.
Oh, it was brilliant.
That guy killed it.
No.
Yeah, he was made for that role. He was super, like, just very believable as the fish out of water type character, and as annoyed as people get at like Aquafina, or
I don't know. I liked her. I
liked her. I thought she was great.
Funny.
She was fun.
I thought she was great, and I think you needed her in the movie to deliver that kind of lightness and to almost be a kind of cipher, stand-in for the audience, kind of asking some of those questions. She helps navigate you through it.
Well, I felt like she was the thing that she was the character that you can commiserate with, that you can connect with and have, like, she didn't have any powers. She was a witness.
Empathize with, for sure.
Yeah, but then she still got to participate. And then, because obviously Shang-Chi, there's no one in the world that's going to be the same, and that guy was ripped. It was like, God dang, dude. Came ready to go for that movie.
It was fun seeing Michelle Yeoh in the film as well. I'm always down for seeing Michelle Yeoh in a film. So
Casey, I completely agree, and thought it was very well cast, and that they did a great job of taking the whole way they'd treated the Mandarin 7 or 8 years ago, with the whole, because clearly at the time of the Iron Man 3, they didn't feel they could make the Mandarin a kind of an Asian villain, because at that point they were worried about, holy, we don't want to get this wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get the whole storyline with
I think they did it respectfully and very smartly.
Yeah, they did, and they managed to take that back to, the Mandarin, and they don't use the Mandarin name, but that figure does actually exist as an Asian, like, super criminal, but they gave it such a lot of light and shadow. I think they did rehabilitate the whole thing really, really well in a way that was very culturally respectful. I really enjoyed it. I thought they kept on just, getting the notes right. And at the point where, obviously this is spoiler country, right? At the point where you've just got shitloads of mythological Chinese dragons appearing, in the climax, I was like, holy, they've really rung the bell. On celebrating Asian culture here and Asian mythology. I just thought it was wonderfully done.
What do you guys think of Wong finding the abomination in the ring?
Oh, I thought it was great. I loved that.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was like, oh, they brought back the abomination.
and he calls him by his name at some point as well. He calls him Emil or whatever. I thought that was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked I like the celebrity status they gave Wong.
Yes, I like that
Hey, I'm Wong. I know who you are.
Yeah.
He's not like a caricature, or he's a fully developed character, and he's actually like going out there and like getting some. He's like doing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was a nice
by
callback.
the way, that's a great thread that runs through all of the movies since Endgame that have now appeared, and all the TV shows, is that essentially the extended Avengers lineup from Endgame, the people who saved the planet against Thanos, they've all become very famous.
Yeah.
They're all very well known. I mean, that dealing with that celebrity you can't escape is a big part of what happens in Hawkeye, right? But it's the fact that everybody knows them. I thought that, but of course, that is what would happen. That is what would happen.
Yeah. I like the fact that we're going to tread into, because we do have another movie that we didn't actually talk about. Maybe we can do an whole episode, but Spider-Man No Way Home.
Oh, yeah, shit, man.
I haven't seen it yet.
Casey,
you have,
mate.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of spoiler, Casey, but it doesn't ruin the movie in any way.
I've already heard it. It's all good.
I like that Wong was named Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, that's great.
Because you had the 5 years of the snap, and they're not going to allow the Sorcerer Supreme not to be mentioned or named. And the fact that they have Wong as a Sorcerer Supreme, and with Doctor Strange coming back, still maintaining that, I thought that was great. I thought that was a great way to do it.
I think what we need to do here, given the fact that Casey's not seen it, and given the fact that it's such a massive event, No Way Home.
Yeah,
and it's such a great
deserves its own show.
Work, but it's so big, we can do an hour on that easily, because there's so many things to talk about. So I think we're still right to keep this to the movies that we're talking about.
It's a different, like Shang-Chi is amazing. It's a lot of fun. It's a standalone, but it can be considered a standalone. There's things that happen that are going to have reverberations. Reverberate. I can't talk today. Are going to be going through. My mental gymnastics is failing me, but not the same type of. Spider-Man No Way Home has so many implications for the Marvel universe as a whole that it needs to be talked about separately.
For sure. Casey, have you got any final words about Shang-Chi that we haven't?
If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's fun. I didn't know what to expect
right now.
Yeah. I didn't know what to expect. Started watching it and was thinking I would watch it over a period of a few days or whatever, just in the few minutes I have between being a dad and working and trying to do others. I could not stop watching. It was fun, and I've actually watched it like twice.
Shang-Chi is also, a lot of the Marvel movies are great and you want to watch them with your family, but there's a lot of them that have scenes that if you have like an 8 or 7-year-old, that you might like want to have to think twice about having them watch certain things. I mean, I'm just, as a parent, it just is what it is. Shang-Chi is one of the few that I feel like you can just watch.
Yeah.
Not worry about what's being said or done. And they all have these really great moral compasses that are going on throughout the whole thing. I don't know. It was a great, wonderful movie.
I massively exceeded my expectations. And at a point where I was like, am I really going to go to the cinema and see this? Shall I wait for it to go on Disney Plus? And I ended up going and seeing it within its first 2 or 3 days of release. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was awesome. Great. I wasn't expecting another great Marvel, because one of the big issues on a macro level I had post Endgame is that it was like, okay,
where do you go from here?
Now it's like, where do you go from here? And by its very nature, a lot of the characters that are being developed are like the B-list characters, and we're about to talk about a massive version of that. In my opinion, we're going to segue into talking about the Eternals. Now, the Eternals is a comic that I've never liked. It's it's produced towards the end of Jack Kirby's highest period of creativity. So it's during his like mid-70s Marvel return. It's not very well written. It has some amazing artwork and amazing concepts, but it feels a bit like New God's Light. It always did to me, and I basically don't like it. And I really don't like the the reinventions of it that have come since by great creators. There's a Neil Gaiman, John Romita Jr. version, which
Bored
I'm
the
not really a
shit
fan
out of
of.
me.
I think it's very boring too.
Yeah.
And so we're getting into that era where all the no-brainer characters, Marvel characters, have been adapted, and now it's like, well, we've got these big pieces of the Marvel mythos that we can adapt, but to me, the Eternals absolutely sits alongside the Inhumans on a kind of desert island of their own. Where I don't really like either of these concepts, and
I was a massive Marvel fan in the 80s. That was my primary comic book reading time. You know what I mean? But in Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, to a point, not a big Fantastic Four fan. The weird thing with the Fantastic Four, not to get off on a tangent, is when I was growing up in the 80s, none of my friends read Fantastic Four. Nobody. And it was like when you had a Fantastic Four crossover, it was like, oh man, I don't want to read this, And it's funny how much it's weird how much they've influenced and they're a part, and how excited some people are for Fantastic Four. But even friends that I had when I was a kid, and I go back, I'm like, but you hated the Fantastic Four. Why do you care now? But it's weird. I don't know. I felt like it was a boring comic book. And Humans and Eternals, I think, when did they come out? Was it in the 70s or was it in the early 80s? I didn't even know about them.
The Inhumans were part. It was part of the Fantastic Four mythology in the 60s. Yeah. And was introduced in the 60s. But we've talked a lot about this on this podcast before. Essentially, the Inhumans, one of the big flaws about it, I think, is it's the story of a royal family, right? I think there are massive flaws in that concept that just aren't interesting.
I just never read them. I didn't even know.
Andrew's like, nope, I don't want to hear about another royal family.
I've got to deal with the royal family in the UK. I don't want to. I don't want to deal with the royal family with power center very much. and the Eternals, that was created. Is it about 1977? And again, kind of it was Jack Kirby. For me, the beginning of his sort of creative decline.
Yeah.
Although he was still kind of at the height of his powers as an illustrator.
One thing that I've heard is that he had never meant for the Eternals to be a part of the rest of the Marvel universe. So, the concepts that are in the comic are kind of incongruous with the whole. So that's one thing. Completely honest here, I have not seen this film, and it's specifically because I'm like, it's on Disney Plus now. I should have watched it. I should have seen it.
This is absolutely it's one of those brilliant things that people do. I'm on this podcast and I want to think about this film, which by the way I haven't seen, and it's the ultimate cardinal sin, mate. This is what I want to tell you about the Eternals, which I haven't seen. This is what I don't like about the concept.
No, my whole thing is that's why I haven't seen it, though.
It's an absolute masterpiece.
It's just bored the shit out of me. I've read the books, and I'm like, I don't really have the capacity to care about these characters. The cast I love.
I collected comic books. I read Bud Plant catalogs. I read Wizards. I read so many publications around comic books. I knew who Jack Kirby was. I read all this stuff. I went through all of the 80s and halfway through the 90s when I stopped collecting comic books, never knowing who the freaking Eternals was until the movie was announced. I don't even know how that's possible. But listening to what Andrew was saying and listening to you, you read it and you have no care for it. I just know that my comic book shops because I frequented 3 comic book shops growing up. None of them pushed it. Nobody talked about them because the stories were probably, and nobody even read it. And so it was never pushed. But it's a property that Marvel owns. So they want to get it out. And so they did. I watched the movie on Disney Plus. I enjoyed it.
How was it?
I enjoyed it as a movie. You know what I mean? Not thinking about Marvel, not thinking about all that. There was some themes that they allowed to happen, which I was shocked that I was surprised that Disney allowed to happen. I'm going to spoil them for you, Casey, because I don't think it ruins the actual movie as a whole.
I'm gonna see it.
Icarus committing suicide was shocking to me. I was really surprised that Disney allowed that to happen, and then showed and then had it as a theme in the show, and then the fact that it resonates with the characters near the end. I thought they did some things really, really well. I thought the whole deviant thing was boring. You know, I didn't like they're bad. You know, the special effects for the what they call them, the Eternals. Is it the Eternal? Looked fantastic. And when he shows up in the sky, and he's so far back because he's so massive, but he takes
talking about the Celestials.
Yeah, the Celestials. Yes,
yeah,
thank you. The Celestials. That looked amazing. And some of the things were really cool, but some things were just the movie had no real point, you know? And I think that's where it lacks. There was no real point of it. Their excuse for not joining in on the fight with Thanos was bullshit, because they're like, we can't this their celestial that controls them won't allow us to join in the fight of men. That wasn't a fight of men. That was a fight of existence for the entire freaking universe. So their excuse of why they said they couldn't join was crap. And then just some of the things were just, there was just a lot of boredom in it as a whole. But if I didn't have any connection to Marvel, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does make sense. I mean, my view is that for me, and just for me, I think it's one of the three weakest Marvel movies, and I
100%.
think it's sitting in a room with Iron Man 2 and with Thor: The Dark World. But of the three of them, it's probably the one of those three that I would like to watch the least. You know, I think I'd watch Dark World and Iron Man 2 before I'd watch Eternals again.
Ooh.
That said,
says a lot.
There are the performances are all great, because you know it's the usual brilliant Marvel movie casting. You know, the usual stellar casting. It's very well put together.
Yeah.
I personally think the flaw is in the original property itself. I just don't think it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
But it also does a couple of things. I love the inclusivity of it, because they've thought very carefully about the casting of the origins of each Eternal, and they've flipped around the race of some of the Eternals. They've flipped around the gender of some of the Eternals.
You know what I liked about it, Sumner? They did such a good job on that aspect that I didn't even notice that they were putting that in the forefront.
It was brilliantly done. And that's what I really responded to positively about it. And also, there are a lot of people that I know. Originally, there was a lot of negative reaction about it, right? The most mediocre Marvel movie, which I think it probably is for me. But there's a lot of people I know who it's like, again, you know, my son and my daughter-in-law, they didn't go and see it originally. And on the basis that it was like, hey man, there's just too many Marvel movies now, so I'm going to cherry pick. Joe was like, I'm going to cherry pick the ones I want to go and see. And having seen all of them up to Endgame, right? And so he only watched it when it came out on Disney Plus, but they both really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
They've completely exceeded their expectation. So I think if you went in without any expectation, I think there's a lot of people who've heard that it's not very good, or have gone in without any expectations, have actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And there were a few, I guess my last word on it would be, for me, so I love the inclusivity, I love the cast, and I love the fact that like gender and race weren't issues. And I think Marvel have done, you know, we were talking about Shang-Chi, we were talking about Black Panther, have done stellar work on inclusivity in the MCU. And I think they're like at the cutting edge of really thinking sensitively about those issues, right?
Yeah.
And I had a conversation the other day with Angelique Roche. I don't know if you've ever encountered her work, but she's the African-American lady you always see when they do premieres for when they do anything online with Disney. Generally, she's the person doing the interviews. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And she presents the Marvel Voices podcast, which does really sterling work in this area, and she talks to a lot of creators of color and creators who are kind of, it's all pro diversity. It's the very epitome of the opposite of all that comicscape. What she does is really good, and we're working on a Black Panther project at the moment at Titan. And
cool.
We've done some we did a great collection of prose stories about a year ago, Tales of Wakanda, which I'd really recommend to everybody. And it's nearly all African American authors who worked on the book. It's African American editor. It's a great piece of work. But to flip, I was talking to her, and it's just brilliant the amount of work I think that Marvel have done around this issue. Like, it's really important to them, and it's really important to the administration. So even it's somebody who's a cis white male like Feige, he really cares about issues of inclusivity and everybody having a voice. So I think that's a great thing, right?
Takes everybody.
And so that's the great thing about Eternals, I think. The other bit that I really enjoyed was a minor part of it, but they also used the Eternals to introduce Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, who's played by Kit Harington from Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
and even though his total screen time is about 10 minutes, and there's a great post-credit scene with him where you also hear Blade's voice. So imagine they're going to actually have Black Knight in the Blade movie, is where that's going to go.
That's crazy.
And it's about, sorry about the spoiler here, Casey.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and you have one of the end credit sequences, the Black Knight is Dane Whitman opening up the Ebony Blade, which is kind of a living, breathing thing.
It's just kind of funny too, because it's Kit Harington that's doing it, who was, of course, Game of Thrones, and it was in the Black. I can't remember the name of the little group, but it's and he's kind of almost playing a very similar character.
Yeah,
wasn't Kit Harington the brother, the king? No,
it was John Stark, or whatever.
He plays the bastard, or he plays a bastard. He plays Jon Snow.
Yeah. So I got
Jon
him
Snow,
and the brother
that
got his head chopped off, mixed up.
Yeah, no, he's defo still alive at the end of it.
He's like one of the main dudes. He comes back to life. Remember, they had the whole thing where he dies at the end of the season, and he told everybody he died, and people got mad because he came back the next season. They were mad that he lied about it. Just like, what am I supposed to say?
So I get the sense that certainly, Casey, you've got the same issues with me about the comic. Kenric, you didn't know the comic, but I don't think the movie's an out-and-out failure. I just don't think because I think the baseline is it's good, solid entertainment. But I think one of the problems that you have now that have been 10, 13 years worth of Marvel films, and they've essentially created a genre of their own, which is MCU movies, right? They have done they did an amazing job when they were 10 years in, over 22 films, of the standard being incredibly high.
Yep.
Normally, when you look at on Rotten Tomatoes about Marvel films, they're all getting upwards of 80%, right? Generally speaking, people think that technically they're very good, but the longer the MCU goes on, the more they're not going to be able to keep up that standard of quality the whole time. So you will get films like this that are just simply not as good.
And some people really love this
wholly without merit,
Yeah.
And
so on the tomato meter, by the way, for the Eternals, 48%.
There you go.
The audience score was 78%, so it did much better with the audience. But critics, on the other hand, not really big fans.
Honestly, I don't look at the critics anymore. I think the critics are horseshit when it comes to judging a movie,
especially like genre films.
And it can be very politically driven. It can be opinionated driven. It can be all these things that don't make sense to the movie itself or the TV show, whatever they're supposed to be reviewing. And so I look at the audience, everything I look at.
As you know, Matt, I spent years as a film critic, and what years being a film critic taught me was film criticism is, certainly when it comes to reviewing new movies that come out, totally irrelevant. I think the tomato meter is interesting because it literally just rounds up the consensus of opinion. And I think, therefore, it's always interesting because where I think it fails, the tomato meter fails on when films get around about 50%. It's failing there because actually you can go in and what you'll find in the 50% range is films that some people love and some people hate.
Yeah.
But what it's good for is if you get a film in the 90% range, generally it's nearly always good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you get a film in the 10% range, generally it's nearly always poor.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and I've said this many times, I think we've had this conversation before. One of the reasons why I never read film criticism anymore outside of a couple of key authors who I know their viewpoints align with mine.
I think that's the point right there.
The response to art is individual, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, for my absolute favorite film in the world, I can show you somebody I know who hates it, and vice versa. There are film guys you guys have talked about that you've absolutely loved. And I thought, well, that's absolutely terrible. I can't stand it. But that's the point, because everybody comes to art in an individual way.
That's right.
And remember a couple of years ago that really well-known film, Tim Burton made a film about that. The woman who was actually responsible, even though her husband took the credit.
Big eyes.
Big-eyed pictures. Now, that big-eyed artwork, I've always hated it. I can't even really look at it. It really just it just gets on my nerves. Yeah. To me. But there's people who would live or die for that artwork and love it. To me. And the whole reason that story exists. So it happens all the time with it's like with music. Some people love thrash metal. I can't stand that, but I love jazz. Some people hate jazz.
Yeah. I think when it comes to critics,
I think that's brilliant. I think that's what's great about the world.
I think when it comes to critics too, I shouldn't say they're all, because they're not. But I think if you can find that one that align, like they suggest this movie and this movie and they like it, and you go and you agree with them, you can start to find that critic, those music critics, those art critics, those movie critics that, they already saw it, they liked it. If they liked it, I know that I'm probably going to like it.
The taste indexes with yours. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's the way you really need to look at them and decide. Rotten Tomato, to me, I hate the fact that the critics will hate it, but then you look at the audience score and it's like 90% or 80%.
Well, I think it's a mistake to look at it in that level of detail, because the other thing that happens, of course, is you get review bombing. So you get things like, you get really exercised factions of fans taking down the popular, the audience score. It's happened a lot with Star Wars movies, right? Yeah. Even though quite a lot of those I didn't particularly like, you get those lunatic, whatever the Star Wars equivalent of comics gate is, you get those lunatics like voting movies down before they've even seen them. And just as on a macro issue, this has always fascinated me. And we've talked about this before on the comic podcast, is that you get people who are out there who are so invested in these properties that are there to entertain us, that are owned by big global multinational corporations. They get so invested that they spend so much of their time arguing to death about and advocating for these movies that are the product of a corporate machine, right? It's not like they sit there violently arguing for the output of a particular author. Like I'm a Raymond Chandler fan, and this is easily the best, like Philip Marlowe novel. It's not like that. It's like that they spend all this time arguing and celebrating this conveyor belt stuff, which at the end of the day, and as much as I love it, and know how much I love it, I know how much you guys love it, but it's mass market entertainment produced by a huge faceless machine designed to keep us busy while the same people destroy the earth that we're living on. It's a fact. So you're essentially, once you start living in it to that point where you and your mates round up, you team up and you start voting down the audience rating for, let's say, I don't know, like so Star Wars, some shit Star Wars film. It's like, you really lost the point of being alive there, man. You know what I mean? You're just hugely missing it. Do you know?
So there you guys go. If you want to have a unique conversation with your family and friends, love more, hate less, read comics. That's great. I love that.
Absolutely, I love it.
Go watch the Eternals and spark a conversation, because as much as Sumner and I are not huge Eternals fan, look at the conversation we just had over it. I mean,
I'm gonna watch this movie and in like 2 weeks, and be like, all right, you guys, we need to go back and re-record this because
that's right. Casey will come back going as the supreme advocate of Eternal.
Yeah.
I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was amazing.
Guys, just
let's get into our level. Let's get into our TV shows.
Yeah,
and let's start with Hawkeye. And I was pleasantly surprised by this show. I
enjoyed it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was excited for it. Was one of those shows that I got irritated that Disney does the once a week. You know what I mean? Instead of the Netflix drop. You know what I mean? I think that's what I call it now, right? The Netflix drop. Everybody knows exactly what you're saying.
Yeah,
but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's going to have widening implications. I love that they brought in Kingpin, you know, and the one thing I heard people talk about is his strength, and we can talk about that in a little bit. I think all I could think is, did you never read the comic books?
Yeah.
He's got the comic book strength. I mean, this is a character who in Into the Multiverse, he killed Spider-Man with his bare hands.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
And nobody
said anything about that.
They complained.
How's he able to do that?
Yeah.
Surely that's not possible. Because that version of Kingpin has to have superpowers because Spider-Man's so incredibly strong. If you're going to kill Spider-Man with your bare hands, and I know this is a super fanboy conversation, that version of Kingpin is essentially a superpowered mutant of some sort, even if they don't spell it out, because the only way that... And actually, in Into the Spider-Verse, that's the way he's drawn as well, right? That's the way he's designed. He's this huge, like, man-mountain.
Yep.
But, so anyway, please carry on, Kenric, because I've got some
I just thought it was an interesting thing. But has Hawkeye redeemed himself? Is he where he needs to go? And what is the name of the actor that plays Hawkeye? Jeremy Renner. Yeah.
Jeremy Renner.
Yeah, Jeremy Renner. There was some talk about him losing that role and Xing it all together because of what is an ex-girlfriend or ex-wife?
It was there was some controversy in his personal life, all tied around his daughter and his wife.
Yeah, but it all came out that a lot of the things they were saying wasn't in fact 100% correct.
That's right, and it was somewhat tied into the fact that there was speculation. I touched upon this real briefly because I don't really care about it, but it's speculation that he didn't have a real relationship and it was a contract, the design to produce a kid for him, all that kind of stuff. All I can say is, as somebody who used to publish, a celebrity gossip magazine for 3 years and hated every second of it, and knows a load of stories from behind the scenes in Hollywood,
all conflated
in the entertainment. I mean, it's such a viper's nest of horse and obfuscation and what really goes on behind the scenes, the reality of so many TV and movie stars' lives. It's so completely different from what we think it is, and it's so much more deliberately put together. Do you know what I mean? And so few Hollywood actor relationships that we see on the pages of People are actually real. There's so many kind of relationships for pay and contracted relationships and whatnot. It's all so controlled and designed by PR firms.
Crazy.
Once you scratch the surface of it, very rarely are you seeing things that are true echo of somebody's life. That's and crazy. Generally nowadays, the only time you get to really hear the truth of somebody's life, if they're a celebrity, is when they've passed away and people start openly talking about stuff. But, these days, people's lives are managed within a fraction of an inch by PR companies. So there's so many, for example, Hollywood movie stars who in reality are gay. It's very well known that they are, but they present as straight people. Do you know what I mean? That's just one, and I could give you a shopping list of stories that I know about people were the public image, and it's not just about that, it's about many other things, so different from what you know about them.
So sad.
And so the reality is that there was some speculation about Renner's personal life. I don't want to get into what that speculation was because I don't even really care about it. I think the thing is, it was correctly seen ultimately as actually it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
he's a decent bloke who gives a good performance. So we're not going to kick him to the curb, and
that's good.
And so for the time being, he's continued being Hawkeye. For me, Hawkeye was the big unexpected treat of this year in Marvel. And what I mean by that is, yeah, Shang-Chi was a big treat.
Yeah.
And No Way Home lived up to all of my hopes for it, shall we say.
Right.
No Way Home, I think, is a triumph, is an absolute triumph. And everything I wanted them to do, they did. And I think it's undoubtedly one of the best 2 or 3 Marvel movies ever. I think it's an incredible piece of work.
Yeah.
Right? But I had this strong feeling it was going to be as good as it was. I thought it was going to be great. I had this feeling, and it turned out to be even better than every single thing I would have liked them to have done. It happened in that film. Right?
Yeah.
So I was very pleased with that. But Hawkeye was, adapting one of my favorite comic books for the last couple of years. Matt Fraction and David Ager's My Life as a Weapon. It's an incredible piece of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for them to take that, but to turn it into a story that furthered the movie version of Hawkeye's story and made it a seasonal Christmas TV show. And I'm a massive lover of Christmas. For it to be this almost like perfect Marvel MCU Christmas treat, I just thought it was amazing. And I just loved this out of every episode. I too, if they'd have put it all up at once, I would have watched it in one afternoon.
Yeah.
And but at the timing of it, so that it started around Thanksgiving, and then it ran through to just before Christmas Eve. I just thought that was great. I really enjoyed every second of it, and what they did with it, and I thought it was very well cast.
Yeah,
and I loved the interplay. I loved every second of it.
Casey, go.
So one thing that I was kind of bummed that at first that Renner didn't get an opportunity to have a standalone Hawkeye film.
Yeah.
And when I got into the show, I was like, oh no, this is better. This character development you're able to see on this is fantastic. And not only that, but you're kind of able to explore more of that universe, more of his world, and see him as a father, see him, just as a person. But in addition to that, though, I was while you guys talk, I get on the Wikipedia page of the shows, just kind of refresh myself and everything. I didn't know that they were doing a spinoff of the Echo character.
Oh yeah. Well, so she was great. She was really good.
They're doing a spinoff series. So it was officially announced in November of last year.
Yeah.
So it looks like that's a go. That's going to be rad. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I thought she was great as well, actually. I thought her performance was good. And again, they handle the character very sensitively. If I had any reservations, and it's a really small thing, I was really happy to see the Kingpin return. I was extremely happy for Vincent D'Onofrio, who's one of my favourite actors, to be returning as Kingpin. And I love his performance and I love the way he portrays Wilson Fisk. And I didn't have any problems with the enhanced strength. It made sense for him if he's existing within the MCU. The only thing I didn't like, right, and it's a very small thing, was I didn't like the fact that he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
That's so not him.
And I just thought, there's two things he did. He wore a Hawaiian shirt and he also wore a hat, the Panama hat. And I was like, what? In December, it's December. I mean, clearly, and I subsequently read that the wardrobe he wore, that was Vincent D'Onofrio really going back and forth with so it's clearly his vision for how he wanted him to look, so fair play. But that rang a weird bell with me because I loved his wardrobe in the Daredevil show, and I loved his wardrobe in some of the deleted scenes that you see from Hawkeye, which is set earlier on. But him prancing around in a white suit, which could have bought that, but the Hawaiian shirt didn't work for me. I just think it'd be sartorially more dialed up, you know what I mean? Because he suits like the sharp kind of sharp skin suit type of deal. And for me, the Hawaiian shirt just looked a bit too slobbish. Do you know what I mean? For how thin, sharp, for the kind of Savile Row Wilson Fisk. But it was only a very small thing. I mean, I loved the reveal. I thought it was great.
Which reveal are you talking about?
The fact that the bad guy was the Kingpin, and it was Vincent D'Onofrio returning, and of course it dovetails brilliantly with the reveal that happens very early in Spider-Man No Way Home as well. So those two things together are just very, very exciting. But I really loved Hawkeye. I was massively evangelizing about it for, among my I watched it with something I watched with my daughter, and we just had a brilliant time with it. It was great.
Yeah. What do you guys think of Haley Steinfeld?
I thought she was great.
Phenomenal. I think the thing about her is she's become quite well known in recent years, of course, as kind of a singer. Yeah. And she's very attractive and she's a great performer and everything. But she's a brilliant natural actor. She's very good in True Grit, but I think she's in
still the show in True Grit.
Oh yeah, she's just great. Yeah. But what she also is, I'll tell you another awesome performance. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend to anybody. Is she headlined what I think is the greatest teen movie of the last 10 or 15 years, The Edge of 17. She's the star of that movie, and it's made about 5 or 6 years ago. And it's great. It's a real favourite of mine and my daughter's. So now my daughter is in her early 20s now. But that film, I know she's watched it multiple times. We originally watched it together. It's absolutely great. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. The Edge of 17. So I saw when she was cast as Kate Bishop, I thought she was absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And I thought she's great. I thought her chemistry with Renner was really good. By the way, the other person I think is amazing, the part's relatively small in this for obvious reasons, is Linda Cardellini. She's just so good, man. She's so good. She's been good from the get-go, right from Freaks and Geeks onwards. She's just amazing. Yeah. And like we've always said before, right, I think what Feige and his team do really, really well is they just cast really well. Yeah. I think those guys have never really put a foot wrong with their casting.
You know what they got wrong, though? To harken back to Eternals, I think they did a mistake. I thought Salma Hayek was great in that role, but I think Angelina Jolie in the role that they had her in was a mistake.
Around and smolders.
Well, it's just interesting.
I like Angelina Jolie. I actually like Angelina Jolie. I think she's fine. She can do whatever movie she wants to do, and she can. And there's been times where she's amazing. She's not great in everything she does, like anybody, but there's times. But you can't put her in a role that when you look at all the characters, she's a C-level character in that movie, right? She's on the screen a lot, but she has a minor role, right? Doesn't have a lot of speaking, doesn't have a lot of things. But every time you look at her, it's Angelina Jolie, and you don't see her as much of anything. If she's going to be in a Marvel movie, I feel like she needs to have a spectacle kind of role. Either like Jeff Goldblum's role would have been something like that, not that character specifically, but that type of role where when you see Angelina Jolie, you're like, oh my God, it's Angelina Jolie, and she's playing this over the top type of character. That's how you use somebody like Angelina Jolie. Robert Downey Jr. was perfect for Iron Man because Iron Man's an over the top type of character that's played the right way. Could you imagine if Robert Downey Jr. was Icarus? That's how it looked to me. You know what I mean? You see her as this.
Very interesting.
So, but you're right. Marvel, 99% of the time, their casting is so good. Like, I'm a huge Scarlett Johansson fan, and when she talks, even the stuff that she gets in trouble for the things she says, most of the time, I actually agree with her. And that's neither here nor there, but I've always just really liked her acting. I just got a total celebrity crush on her. When she died as Black Widow, I was really bummed. I was like, I want her to play that role more because I just like her in that role. Florence Pugh is killing it as Yelena.
She's great. So good.
She has crossed over where I'm like, I'm okay with Black Widow not being there because you have Florence Pugh just like totally dominating that role. It's awesome.
Kenric, you just made me think something I don't think we ever talked about on camera was Black Widow, which again was another massively exceeded my expectations. Yeah, I literally just went to see that because I thought I got a better fill in the narrative. Just for my own extreme fandom. And I went to see it and loved it. I thought essentially that was Marvel doing a James Bond film, with the distaff female lead. I'm doing it in a Marvel way, but it was very funny to me. I really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, that movie made me.
It's very lighthearted.
It made me sad that she was gone as the Black Widow,
Yeah.
and it made me wish they would have redone the funeral for Tony, because they have the funeral for Tony. Everybody's there. They really did nothing for the Black Widow during that movie, which I
remember we had this conversation.
And I feel like after watching the Black Widow, I felt like they already had Florence queued up to be Yelena, right? And I feel like at the end of Endgame, she should have showed up for that funeral, freaking out and having this massive outburst of emotions because nothing was being done for her sister.
Having said that, you know technically why they couldn't have done that, because it just would have just upended all the beats in the movie. I think from a completist perspective, it would have been great. I just don't think. I think the reason they didn't do it, and I think the implication is there has been some ceremony for Black Widow. We just haven't seen it. I think for the story they told, they couldn't inject another 20 minutes of narrative.
Wait, but they could have done it they could have done it at the end of Black Widow, though.
They could have, but at the end of the Avengers film, where they're literally at Tony's house, so they're not going to have who knows, they may have had one for her elsewhere at her house or wherever. Also, to kind of put a pin on that, I haven't seen the new Black Widow movie either.
Jesus, why are you on?
I've seen Encanto upwards of 20 times.
You do know, right? This podcast is called Make My Marvel. I mean, I just don't think you're understanding the concept. You've actually got to watch the stuff to talk about it, right?
Been a busy guy, man.
Oh my God.
You're going to out yourself in the next one and go, I'm not really a Marvel fan.
I've never read a comic in my life, actually. Who are you guys?
How'd you end up on my Zoom call?
I thought this was about nuclear.
Hey, I got a question for you guys. Yeah. Seeing Haley Steinfeld playing Kate Bishop and her mom, Vera Farmiga, who really is an amazing actor.
Superb actress.
She was great on Boardwalk Empire. Oh my god,
dude, she's great in Boardwalk Empire. She was great,
brilliant in The Departed,
the Psycho TV show.
Yeah.
Motel Bates. I mean, she's great in all those supernatural shows with her and her husband.
Oh yeah, so guys, I'm going to have to pop out for a sec. I'll leave you with my headshot for just a little period of time. I'll be back soon.
But I'm curious, who is she playing? She's playing Kate Bishop's mom, but I feel like a bigger role is coming.
Who knows?
Because she's obviously involved in the mob.
Yeah,
involved with. Kingpin.
We'll probably get into that in season 2. Hopefully.
Yeah, she's a major player. I'm just wondering,
will there be a season 2?
Because I was like, because you don't. My point of talking about Vera is not to espouse her awesomeness. It's the fact that she is a well-known and talented actor, that you don't just hire her to play a minor role on a TV show.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm actually looking up if there's going to be a season 2 of Hawkeye.
I'd be surprised if there wasn't. Or if they do a Kate Bishop TV show.
Or they're going to spin it off and do Young Avengers or something like that.
Do you want to see that? Do you want to see Young Avengers?
I would totally watch that. I don't know. I'm almost 40, but those characters that was a thing when I was, almost at right when I was in high school, I think. Okay. So it was I had kind of stopped reading comics, but I kind of kept an eye on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see that. I think that would be cool. I think that would be exciting. And I don't know, it would allow them to kind of open up the Marvel universe and see the other folks therein, because you're not going to get any more of the Iron Man films. Not anytime soon. You're going to get like,
think they're going to do Ironheart with what's her name?
Who knows? Maybe with Riri.
Yeah.
That would be.
Were you a fan of the Riri storyline?
I thought that was a cool idea. I thought that was cool.
I thought it could be possible. I thought the execution wasn't where it needed to be.
Like,
well,
I don't know, anything to get more people reading comics. Honestly.
That's the thing, right? Right. We had it's funny for people who don't know, we have a Discord channel. You're welcome to join for Spoilerverse. And we'll put it in the notes where you want, if you'd like to join. And we have some very interesting conversations. And one of the conversations we had was what was the changes in comic books and what does it mean? And we've had some people that feel one way, and we have other people who are very wrong way.
That like you can't. If you keep things the way they are, then the audience for the comics are going to die out.
Yeah,
you're just going to have guys that look like us buying comics until they die, and then you're not going to have like the comic industry anymore. Not superhero comics, at least. And so I do not at all blame them for wanting to open up for bigger audiences, and also kind of allowing people the opportunity to see themselves in those characters.
Well, yeah, I mean, comics allow for drastic change, and the thing is there's different things for different audiences, and that's what's nice about this medium. That medium is that you can make those changes. Peter Parker as a white guy living in New York isn't going anywhere. There's always going to write those stories. They're always going to be there. But does it really matter if they change it up and do a Peter Parker that's a person of color? Yeah, and have a completely different storyline.
It can be anybody under that mask.
Yeah. I mean, does it really? Yeah, it can be anybody. I'm just using Peter as an example, right? But it doesn't matter. And it's like the story. Maybe you don't relate to the stories. Well, imagine growing up and having all these stories that none of them relate to you.
Yeah.
And now when they're finally starting to make stories that relate to you, there's a whole group of people freaking out. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, just let it go, man. Let people have fun.
And also, nobody's ever going to take away the last 50, 60 years of Marvel comics.
Well,
like, it'll still be there.
Making the same comic books that you've been reading. You don't want to read Miles Morales? Don't. Fine.
Yeah, read.
It's not meant. If you don't like it, it's not. It's obviously not meant for you.
Webs.
Yeah. So. It's an interesting. It's weird, and I guess we get into this because Eternals did do a very good job of including a lot of different cultures, a lot of different races. Just they did such a great job on it, Casey. When you watch it, you're gonna realize you don't even. For me, I didn't even notice. And maybe part of it is I didn't read those comic books, so I didn't care. But even if I did read the comic books, I don't think I would have cared. That makes sense?
Oh, yeah. Man, I love Neil Gaiman books. And I read the Eternals Neil Gaiman, and
were they good?
I could not. It did not make me care about the characters.
Was that in the 90s, or when did he do those?
No, it was like 2000s. I think like 2010.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't reading that anyway, so I totally missed those. Is that what this? I wonder if that what storyline they're taking this movie off of.
I have no idea, and it makes me so bummed that because there was so much cool stuff in the Kirby books.
Yeah.
Even though I could never get into the characters, the visuals looked awesome. I was bummed that they didn't.
Gaming Eternals from Sumner.
Yeah, I was bummed they didn't take more from what Kirby had kind of laid out, like the bright colors and everything. Everything looked very kind of dull. Yeah, from what I've seen, and I'm sad that.
Well,
but that director apparently had a vision, and hopefully it. I don't know. I'll tell you more when I see it. I'll probably come back.
Yeah, well, we'll have a follow-up to kind of go over. But let's switch gears. For everybody knows who's been following along, we talk a lot of Marvel. And I think that's because DC has not always done.
I'm going to have to actually dip, guys.
You got to leave?
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad. We're just going to get into Peacemaker.
Can I tell you a secret?
Don't tell me you haven't watched that.
Okay, I can see this coming already.
Yeah,
I've seen episode 1, and I enjoyed it.
Well, at least you watched it.
Okay, I've seen one episode.
Okay, real quick. What do you think of the opening titles?
Yeah.
Oh, it made me so like it jazzed me up for it. I was just like, oh yeah. It was so stupid and fun, and it kind of laid the groundwork for. I was like, okay, they're going this way with it.
Yeah,
cool.
You could tell that this show's going to be fun.
You can definitely tell James Gunn had his handprints all over it, and goddamn, thank you for that, because James Gunn he's perfect for the genre.
He's like perfect. Made to make superhero movies.
Yes,
he really is. Yes. Yeah, he really is.
And especially team ups.
Like, he's the person that DC needs to do their films, because they've shat the bed every other opportunity they've had, other than Shazam, which I loved. I didn't like any of the other DC films of late, and I'm sure I'm wrong. And
you didn't like the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad?
No, I did like the Suicide Squad. I did not like Suicide Squad, which was either or. The one that James Gunn did, I enjoyed.
Yeah.
The one that previous with
I'm with what you're saying, mate. It's like
Juggalo Joker.
It's a wasteland once you finish with the Christopher Nolan movies.
Nolan films, yes.
It's kind of a creative wasteland after that, with the possible exception of Wonder Woman, which I did enjoy.
The first one.
There were elements that I did like of Wonder Woman, and then I fell asleep through most of the rest of it.
I didn't her coming out of that
when they were on the island. Yeah, that was
coming out of the trench is so iconic now.
That was very well done. I think Snyder he took the joy out of a lot of the source material. So
I think Gunn is quite clearly all about. I think a good parting shot is. I think your point is, which I totally agree with, is Gunn is all about the joy, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And it's totally infectious.
And the irreverence of the material.
Absolutely right. Which is why it's such a great fit for Suicide Squad. And Cleve Parker's pitch to the DC guys is, give me all the stuff that nobody else wants, and I'll make it entertaining for you.
Yep.
It's what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. I could not.
No one had any expectations on that.
So.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Love you both. Y'all be good.
Peace out. So.
Take care, brother. I love you, man.
See you, bro.
Spaghetti. And we're back.
That's right. We are back. Back in the saddle again. Well, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that as much as we did making it for you. And if you like what you heard and you want to hear more, you got to go check out spoilerverse.com, because at spoilerverse.com we have a plethora amazing directors and artists of all walks of life, and editors and writers, and oh my god, are you a lover of comic books like we are? Then there's so many amazing people from the comic book world over at spoilerverse.com, and I highly implore you to go there and check it out.
Yeah, and while you're there, you can check out all the other podcasts on our network, like Bridges and Geekdoms and Funny Book Forensics and Haphazard Adventures and Nerds from the Crypt and so many more.
Misery
We put out
Point
episodes
Radio.
all the time. Go check all of them out, and check out all of the reviews and previews and articles we have going up every single day for you, every day on spoilerverse.com for you to check out and to read and to love and to like and to comment. We have a store link. You want to help support the site? You can do it two ways. One, go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/spoilercountry, or go to our store link in the middle of the site there and get a t-shirt, a face mask, a hoodie, something, look fly as hell, and help support the site when you do that, because we get $1 or $2. And, maybe you want to talk to us. If you do, you can do it obviously on all the socials, but if you go to scpod.us/discord, you can join our public Discord server and come chat with us all day long.
I couldn't say it better myself, dude.
There you go.
You just mouthed out a ton of information at once. And really, I hope you guys enjoy what you're hearing because we're working our butts off to bring it to you.
We are.
I guess there's only one left thing. Yeah, I'm going to go with it. There's only one left thing left to do.
What's that?
In an oceans of podcasts.